This episode of the Topcast is proudly supported by Baron Writer.
Merlin, don't get stuck on the repertoire. Just remember, get students learning pieces and then figure out what you're going to do with those pieces. Don't get stuck thinking, oh, this is the only piece that I can do that's going to work for 4/4 time or 3/4 time or for staccato or for legato or for crescendo or for rainbow phrases. All of those things are open for us no matter where we go, whether it's Bach, Beethoven, or it's that book that you've got on the piano, those songs from the 80s.
You're listening to the Topcast, the original podcast for growth-minded instrumental music and voice teachers since 2015, with your host, Tim Topham. Our mission at Top Music is to empower instrumental music and voice teachers to find and nurture their innate creativity so that they can teach lessons that are innovative, integrated, and inspiring, and that will have a positive, lifelong impact on their students. Join us each week as we interview teachers and creators from around the world and unpack fun and exciting ideas to maximize your teaching and studio business success. I'm Tim Topham, and you are listening to the Topcast from Top Music Co., the podcast for independent music and voice teachers. It's a place where we try and explore all the smart, creative, future-focused, fun ways to run a thriving music teaching studio. And today we are unpacking an element of music teaching that isn't often discussed, but I think that's actually something that we should change because it's really, really critical. We are talking curriculum models with Dr. Merlin Thompson, who I'll introduce in just a moment. If you've ever wondered how to balance and whether you should balance between how much you give students choice in what they learn and how much you should be directing what they learn, then this topic is what we'll be discussing today around this idea of curriculum models and how we actually judge and balance this. We'll also be talking about non-performance projects that can amplify students' musical personas and can be a really interesting part of an end of year or end of semester recital, and lots more. Let me introduce our guest for today, Merlin Thompson. Award-winning music educator, pianist, author, keynote speaker, and podcast host, Dr. Merlin Thompson is a leading Canadian authority on music studio teaching and the vision behind Teach Music 21C, a thriving community of music teachers focused on 21st century teaching tools. With nearly 5 decades of studio teaching experience and an international impact, including Canada, USA, Australia, New Zealand, China, Finland, Merlin has inspired hundreds of teachers, students, and parents. His passions? Empowering music teachers with strategies that work in today's evolving teaching landscape and helping students to develop lifelong musical connections right from their very first lesson. Welcome to the show, Merlin. It's so great to have you with us.
Thanks, Tim. And thanks so much for the invitation. It's great to be here.
Absolute pleasure. And I think we're probably kindred spirits in our beliefs, particularly about student-centered teaching and the importance of holistic development of students and how we can help. We both help teachers with this area of their teaching. And I believe we're pretty aligned with our own mission and the work we do with teachers. So it's really great to connect with someone who I probably should have met with a long time ago, but you just came up on my radar suddenly and after an article in the MTNA journal, and I thought, we need to connect. Anyway, so today, look, I thought we'd focus on 2 areas where you've got a great deal of experience. One that isn't often talked about amongst music teachers, but is something that most of us struggle with. I certainly did, which is curriculum planning, especially after the method book ends, that whole period of years and years, like what do we actually do? And what beliefs should we have around it? And then secondly, given our theme this month at Top Music is all about repertoire, I thought talking about repertoire selection in the part of curriculum planning could be really good too. So look, before we kick things off, I reckon we should probably define what we mean by curriculum in a music lesson, because it seems like one of those things that only school teachers have to talk about.
Yeah, and that's a really good starting place, but I'm going to do some backtracking before we get to that. And I'm going to say thank you for all the work that you're doing, because we're in an immensely, I would say, transition time of music teaching right now. And we need leaders to help out with that. And you're really I want to congratulate you on the great job that you're doing. The other thing that I want to share with people is that I've been teaching for 47 years.
Oh, my.
And 47 years. And that's not a small amount. And that's a significant number for me. Why do I share that with you? Well, it's because there were periods when it took me 10 years to figure out if something was working or not. And if it wasn't working, it might take me another 10 years to see if that next strategy was going anywhere or not as well. So I've had now, at about this point, 25 years of working with strategies like curriculum models, the topic for today. And I wanted to share with you, why did I go that particular direction? And it all has to do with the questions that we ask ourselves as teachers. And I have to admit, when I first started teaching, the big question that I asked was, what skills and knowledge do I want to pass on to my students? That occupied things for a long time. And then I went kind of, I'm getting somewhere with that question, but I think I need another question. And looking back, I realized that the question I needed was, what musical activities will my students participate in as adults because of the music lessons they had with me this week? So it really shifts from this whole notion of what skills and knowledge do they need to have this lifelong connection to music, to what are the activities that students are going to be doing as adults because of the music lessons that they've had with us.
That's a really great reframing, because it takes the future-focused view that we all have inside us. We all want our students to play full life. That's the goal, or have some kind of engagement in music. But to actually think, okay, what is that engagement most likely going to be when they are 30, 40, 50? And then working back from there, that's a great way to reframe it.
Yeah, and even for me, like my student Nathan's going off to university this year. So the discussion was, he's going to pharmacology. So that's all good. He wants a secure job. I get that. But Nathan, the discussion with him the last couple of months has been, will the keyboard go with him to university or not? And it's a question of, so when I say to Nathan, is the keyboard going? And is that important to you? And he says to me, well, here's the deal, Dr. Thompson. I realized that I could spend a lot of time playing video games when I'm at university, but that will never happen if I take the keyboard with me. If I take the keyboard with me, I'll have this place that I'm very familiar with, that I know I can spend X amount of time and I can get rejuvenated. It's not going to suck me in and I'm not ever going to be able to get out of that. So it's this whole notion of, I call it the whole recreational music making kind of place, where students are going to make music because, they're chilling out, because it feels good, because it's a distraction, because it's entertainment, because it's a challenge and they need a challenge for that particular day. And all of that, I'm just going to bring to curriculum models, because curriculum models is one of the ways that we can get this notion of what will students be doing in the future? What can we do to sow the seeds for that today? And to answer your question, what is a curriculum model and what do they look like? I'll just say simply, the simple definition is a curriculum model is the materials or experiences that teachers put together to take students along their musical journey. And we have four models that we can choose from. And again, I'll jump right in and explain what they are, because by explaining them, people can see where they fit in. They are teacher-led, student-led, shared curriculum, and neurodiverse curriculum. And teacher-led is the place I'll start first, because it's where everybody's the most familiar. It's the curriculum model that most people experience for themselves as students. What's the determining factor? Well, it's based on a proven methodology, like an exam-based methodology, or the Suzuki method, or Faber and Faber's books that take students from one level to the other. So teacher-led model is already out there. The model that I want to switch right over, which might be at the opposite end of the spectrum, is what I call the student-led curriculum model. And here, we're going to let students, we are going to empower students because they have such strong musical desires. And I'll give you three examples. The adult student who took music lessons as a child, he's got all kinds of pieces they were never able to explore as a child. They've got that list they want to explore. They're not going to give it up. The next is the teenage student who's maybe had 8 or 9 years of lessons, got lots of skills. And again, there's a whole bunch of things that they want to explore. They've got their list as well of things that they want to look at. The next one is my beginner. I'll mention my beginner, Alex, because Alex came to me with such strong personal desires, such a strong musical environment at home, there was no way he was going to buy into what I had to offer. That just wasn't going to happen. Okay, so we've got teacher-led, student-led curriculum. The third one is a shared curriculum. And that's the place where teachers and students, we can blend things together. And there's lots of ways that happens with me. I've got a diminishing ratio of what I use. Beginners, I'm bringing 4 things in. They're bringing 1 thing in. So my student, Alyssa, just to give you an example, she learned 3 things from me. Then she learned Believer from, Imagine Dragons. Okay. My next group of students, we're going 2 from me, 1 to them. And probably around late elementary school, we're going one-on-one. And I'll just do a shout out to one of my colleagues, a voice teacher, who has a 50-50 ratio right from the get-go. And I always remember what she said when we talked about the shared curriculum, because she said to me, Merlin, if a student wants to sing a piece, there's nothing you can do to stop them. And then she added, and why would we want to do that anyway?
And why would you? Yeah, correct.
Yeah, so 3, teacher-led, student-led, shared curriculum. And then I also want to make just space for a neurodiverse curriculum, which could be teacher-led, could be student-led, could be a shared curriculum. And I want to highlight the needs of neurodiverse students because they're not the same as neurotypical students. They may need some relaxation. They may need some revisiting all the principles that we've used with these 3 other curriculum models. So there they are. There's the 4 of them. Teacher-led, student-led, shared curriculum, and neurodiverse. And what's the whole point? The whole point is that when the curriculum matches what students are looking for, we can anticipate success. When the curriculum model is out of sync with who students are or what they're looking for, we may have a tough time getting things going.
Wow. Okay. We've just covered a whole lot of ground here, Merlin. Thank you for the overview. I just wanted to actually mention, I don't know if you can see on my music rack, this book here is Songs of the 80s. I got it out last night. I haven't played for like probably a week, and I thought I just want to do something fun. And I was playing through 80s music, and I was thinking, as you were saying, what is it that adults are most likely to do or want to do? And, for me, being able to play that, and even better, to have someone or a group of people want to sing some show tunes while I play, that is the best thing for me. I absolutely love doing that. And I often think, I would love to have my students get to the point where they could do that same kind of thing. And so that's what you're saying. Think about that. What is that? What skills do they need to be able to pick up a book like this and be able to play it with confidence at a level that they're happy with, that maybe people can sing along? And then let's work back from there. Is spending all our time on Beethoven going to give them that skill? Now, there's nothing wrong with learning Bach and Beethoven. I've done a lot of it and I still play both of them. But is it going to get them there? Probably not. Maybe some small elements. So what do we need to include? And that's the kind of thing that you're asking. That's the question you're asking, right?
Yeah, Tim, I will say I was very fortunate in my university years. So this is now 50 years ago for me. I was a university student. And one of the parting bits of advice that my university piano prof had for me was, Merlin, don't get stuck on the repertoire. Just remember, get students learning pieces and then figure out what you're going to do with those pieces. Don't get stuck thinking, this is the only piece that I can do that's going to work for 4/4 time or 3/4 time or for staccato or for legato or for crescendo or for rainbow phrases. All of those things are open for us no matter where we go, whether it's Bach, Beethoven, or it's that book that you've got on the piano, those songs from the 80s.
Yep. That's a really good reminder, I guess, for us all too, because I think we often do think, my student needs to know staccato, so I better find a piece for that. And we can get very bogged down in the specifics. So look, I really love the model, the approach that you've taken with these 4 models. And I haven't thought of it that way myself, even though I've kind of done those things. And I imagine teachers listening will be able to see themselves in these models too. We often start, I think, as new teachers, if we don't have specific training, running a teacher-led curriculum, because we all receive that. I think pretty much everyone over the age of 40 probably received a teacher-led curriculum, right?
I think that's pretty accurate, Tim.
Yeah. But we have all seen as teachers in the last 15, 20 years that students want something more. They want something different. And Look, I think the biggest impact on this, I'm wondering if you agree, Merlin, is technology and the fact that there's nothing stopping one of our kids from learning something on YouTube now, probably badly. If we're just like, no, sorry, we don't do that in our lessons, they'll go off and learn it themselves anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes back to that, my colleague who with the 50-50 who said, why would you want to stop them? Because they're going to go and do it anyway. So the best thing that we can do is to be their support mechanism and to be the person that's saying, bring that to me. I'm going to see what you're doing it to see if you've got challenges that you can't solve on your own. Maybe the bass part is written too difficult. Maybe it's an orchestra reduction that's not really meant for an intermediate piano student. Bring the music so we can see what we can do together. I've got the expertise to help you with that. And we can work through those kinds of problems together so that students really do connect with the music that's in their ears right now. And you're right. Technology has really done a huge thing for us. And I always remember my student, I'll just give you Angie, younger brother Luke. And we're talking about Luke one day. And Angie says, Dr. Thompson, Luke's a very impatient person. I said, I've never seen that during his lesson. And she says, well, when he goes to download things from Netflix, he gets really annoyed if it doesn't happen like that. And I went, he's downloading stuff at 5 from Netflix. Yeah, I have yet to download my first thing from Netflix at this point because my partner does all of that for me. So that for me was like, okay, the world is there. Students are living in the world. And how can they help but not be connected to music in many ways that we cannot anticipate?
I think another challenge for teachers is that they have to redefine their role as a teacher when there is more student-led activity going on. Because, and I've had many teachers come to me and go, I just don't know what to do. My student has learnt this on YouTube. How do I help them? And I have to remind them, as you have just mentioned, that you have so much knowledge. You're just not used to this way of delivering that knowledge. You're used to taking the lead and teaching it via the reading method. This time you have to rethink, okay, how can I shape this? How can I help this student? Is it about the fingering, about phrasing, about dynamics, about musicality? You have all that knowledge. It's inside you. You just need a new frame to help get it out there. So I think that's another challenge.
Yeah, and you're touching on something that's really important, which is how do we communicate with students? And you mentioned something. Typically, we take the lead with students. We communicate with them what we think they need to know. So when people ask me, what do I do? What's the first thing I do when the student brings a piece I'm unfamiliar with? They've got from who knows where. Like let's give my student.
Some of them are so bad. Oh my goodness.
She showed up with a piece from a group called Blackpink. It's called Shut Down. Interesting. The melody is based on La Campanella is what it's based on.
No way.
It's written in the key of B flat minor. All right, so Linda brings this piece. She's a transfer student. She's had 6 months of lessons. She's 12. And she looks to me like I'm going to just, magically solve everything for her. But that's not what happens. What happens is I ask the question, Linda, what do you need help from me? What are you struggling with in this piece? What's going well? What's not? And those just very simple questions of gathering that little bit of information, finding out where students are coming from. What do they need from me? That's a really important part of our teacher-student collaborative journey.
On your shared curriculum, you were mentioning a sort of percentage approach whereby, let's say a student is learning 10 pieces in a year. Hopefully they're learning a few more than that, but if it's 10, you're perhaps when they are, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, and this is another challenge I think teachers have as well. If they are open to students learning things that they want to learn, how much is okay? And how much do we actually give them things that we know that they need to learn? It's kind of like they've got to eat their veggies as well as they're not veggies. So you mentioned sort of when students are younger, perhaps they're 7, 8-year-old beginners, we're probably mainly teacher-led with a little bit of student-led, right? And then I guess my question is, that changes over time as they get older and they want to have more say in what they do. So how do every student is different, obviously. Is there a kind of timeline that you will start to loosen up in inverted commas and become more student-centered, or is it just student-specific?
Yeah, so I think the answer to that question is that the curriculum models are there so that we can define what we're doing as teachers. And the curriculum models aren't there as a rule. So if you start off with shared curriculum, you have to stick with that forever. If you start with a student-led curriculum, you have to stick with that forever. What I find with my own teaching and with my colleagues, and we talk about this, is that knowing about the curriculum models really just helps us to understand that, for about 6 months, we really had this shared curriculum thing going, and it was going really well. And then there were about maybe 2 or 3 weeks I needed to shift out of that into, it might have been the student-led curriculum for a while. I just needed to focus on what do students really want to do? And after we were there for a while, it came to maybe now I need to come back and look at some teacher-led things for a while. So it's this notion that the curriculum models aren't static and they aren't guidelines. It's not like a football game where the rules stay the same from the beginning of the game to the end of the game. The rules don't change midway through the game. In learning to sing or playing a musical instrument, the curriculum models are there for us to shift through as we need to. And I'll maybe give you the example of my student, Jesse. So in senior high school, he decided he wanted to do 3 upper level exams. So here in Canada, they're the Toronto Conservatory. These are not easy exams. They take a lot of practicing. We've been on a shared curriculum point up with them at that point, but it meant that to do these exams, I needed to take the lead. I needed to choose the repertoire. I needed to assign what scales and technique and all that kind of stuff that he was going to do. But we realized really quickly that only me leading the way all the time wasn't going to work. And so we adopted a 3-week on teacher-led curriculum, a 1-week on Jesse-led curriculum. And so there was this 3 weeks on, 1 week off, 3 weeks on, 1 week off. And at first I thought, wow, this is really ingenious. Until I came across the research by all these neuroscience people who are saying, musicians, you need to change things up. Like doing the same thing week after week or day after day, you may think you're making progress, but if you change things up, you actually would make more progress. And I found that with this 3-week on, 1 week off, or 1 week on Jesse, that 1 week on Jesse lifted everything that he'd been doing before. And when he came back, we looked at all those things differently. We had a different eyes on things. And it reminds me of another thing that I want to connect with this story, because it's my colleague, Elizabeth, who's a professional musician. She performs with her duo husband all the time. What does she do 3 weeks before the concert? She doesn't play any of the repertoire that's on the concert. All right. You might think, oh, that's dangerous. Why would you do that? And she says, well, because she knows on the first day when she comes back, she'll discover what's solid and what's not solid. And those 2 bits of information are really valuable for that upcoming concert now 3 weeks away. So the notion of moving through the curriculum models as we need to, as we see where we're at. Yeah, that's the whole thing.
Yeah, as the student ages, I think it will shift. And as the goals for the student, as you just said, changes as well. They suddenly need to do a scholarship application or an exam or whatever it is. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that Jesse model that you had is actually, it's not one that I've really talked to teachers about, but I think those listening who are in Australia and the UK and exam-focused kind of cultures, that could actually work quite well for them, where, yes, we have an exam, so we do need to be fairly teacher-led, but maybe we could do 3 weeks on and 1 week, 1 lesson. It's all about the child and the music they want to learn. And that will sustain them because they'll keep playing that music even though we're not focusing on it for the next 3 weeks, right? I really like that approach. Good flexibility. What you've just heard is the beginning of the composition Paper Aeroplane by Jacob Metelka. This flowing, charming piece is part of the collection Little Virtuoso and offers a fine example of Metelka's compositional style, imaginative and witty, with appealing melodies and unusual colourful harmonies. Contemporary yet highly accessible, it is pedagogically valuable. It's music with real substance. The pieces are wonderfully suited to advanced beginners. So you can discover this album and other titles by Metelka in the Baronwriter web stores, for example at www.baronwriter.us. That's BARENREITER. There you'll also find the complete Baronwriter Urtext catalogue, including the new edition of Fanny Hensel's Easter Sonata. Go and check it out.
And it points to valuing what students are doing. So it's really easy to value and validate all the exam material and all the things that we have on our agenda. It's really easy to validate that. And we have ample opportunity to do that. What we may not have ample opportunity to do is to validate and value what's inspiring for students. So I like to think if I have one nice little tag phrase that describes my teaching, I'm all about inspiring students to explore the music that inspires them.
Say it again. I like it.
I'm all about inspiring students to explore the music that inspires them.
Yeah. What a good motto. I like it. Your story actually reminds me of one of my students that I took on. She'd transferred to me from another teacher she'd been learning for 4 or 5 years. She was only 11 or something at that stage and was completely burnt out, ready to quit. She'd just done exam, few pieces, miserable, totally understood. And so she had been teacher-led 100%. When she came to me, I went student-led 100% because I needed to re-inspire her, right? So I said, what do you want to learn? Let's listen to some pop songs. What do you want to learn? And I helped her with that. The fascinating thing for me is that it wasn't that long after that, maybe a couple of months of working on pop songs and things that she found fun, that she said, do you reckon we could do one of those classical pieces again? And then we started shifting back towards the teacher-led. So it's really interesting. I hope teachers listening might take the time to think about some of their students and how they have shifted unknowingly through these curriculum models already. Now we're kind of putting a name to it with Merlin's help. But I think we're probably all doing this already to some extent, which is cool.
It is cool. And my worry is always that people think that switching off of the recognized path is not a good idea. And what I'm really happy with about the curriculum models is that teachers do say just what you're saying. I didn't know that this was what I do. Now that I have a name for it, that I can say, yeah, I switched it up with the student-led curriculum for a couple of months. I feel like I'm valued. Now they're valued as teachers as well. Yeah. So being able to describe what we're doing and give it a name, that's an important part of who we are.
Yeah, giving everybody permission to not just teach how we were taught is so important and so hard sometimes. Even though we know it feels like it's the right thing to do, we've got this thing in the back of our head that's saying, oh no, this is not right. There's something wrong with this. And you know what? I remember distinctly interviewing Forrest Kinney. We had many chats and a number of interviews, and he was telling me about a student that he took on who would only learn the Beatles, refused to learn anything else. And he went along with it. And it took probably a year of this before that student started to ask about other genres. So again, fully student-led and then starts to be teacher-led. So yeah, I think for transfer students in particular, and I do a lot of work with helping our teachers with transfer students because I love transfer students. Teenage transfer students, that's my jam. It's just so much fun. But for a lot of teachers, it can be really challenging. The thing I love about it is you can go student-led, and you should do it, at least for the start, first few weeks, just to see where they're at, what do they want to do. It's a fun time. Anyway, what I want to ask you is that intermediate period, the method book's finished, they're not advanced, and we need to get them, well, assuming that's kind of the goal, to advance their skills. We've got years and years of wilderness, really, because we don't have a method book to follow anymore. So during this period, there has to be some teacher-led focus, generally speaking, I think, for a balance. What advice do you have for teachers during this period about building the curriculum? and trying to progress students through without a book to follow?
Yeah. So I'll go back to my first question is, what activities, music making activities, will these students be doing when they become adults? And, there's all kinds of ways that we can foster that. We can do it through a teacher-led situation. My experience recently has been that I'm using more of the shared curriculum to do that. And that means that I'm drawing from two things. I'm drawing from students getting I'll call them the masterworks intermediate books, the compilation of material that somebody else has put together, whether it's 50 years old or 100 years old, or somebody came out with it in the last 10 weeks. I love using books because I know that if we find one piece in that book, we will also find several more. So whether that's, so I've got that side, but I also want to make sure that I share with you a couple of stories about my students who got to junior high and really continued with a student-led curriculum. And I'll talk about my student Annalise, who decided in grade 8 that she wanted to do a Harry Potter music concert. And so off she went to the music store. She got 2 books, one for intermediate, one for advanced. She came back to me. She said, Dr. Thompson, which one should I choose? I said, Annalise, that's not part of the deal. The deal is you go home and you work your way through these 2 books and you find out which one's going to work for you. And she came back the next week and she said, it's really interesting because the advanced arrangements are really beautiful, but it'll take me forever to learn them. So I'm going to do the intermediate versions. And for me, it was here's the light bulb that went off for me, that Annalise wasn't interested in learning continuously harder repertoire. She'd gotten to a point where she could play well, and she played well enough to satisfy her own needs of music making. So what did she do? She went with the easier book. And that was the pattern that we used for all the concerts she did after that. And she loved getting a theme for the concert, picking something out that she could go to the music store, buy the book. And I imagined it's a lot like the process that Lang Lang or Elton John or that you and I used when we're asked to get ready for a concert. We got our whole thing of music over here. We go through the whole box. We go, I could learn this piece if it will take me 5 years and I'll only be able to play it at half speed. So I'm going to play this piece, which I can learn in a month, and it's going to sound amazing. So what am I saying here? I'm saying that we really have to pay attention to what our students looking for. And the teacher-led, our knowledge and expertise, what did I do with Annalise when she was working on Harry Potter? Well, I worked on all the basics that I work on with every single one of my students. Keeping a steady beat or not keeping a steady beat when it's appropriate. What kind of phrasing are you? Are you letting go in this piece, or are you so focused on getting all the notes right that the piece disappears? So there was nothing different about the conversations that she had than I had with Jesse during my teacher-led weeks with him.
I want to come back to that goal that we started with, that we've come back to a couple of times, about adulthood. Am I right in thinking that your question to teachers listening is, what skills do you feel that your students will need in order to be able to have a fun playing experience then? Or are we asking the student, what would you like to be able to do? Which one of those two is it? Because I think the second one, most students don't have a concept of what that would look like. So is it really down to us to know what those steps are that will get them to that adulthood that we can understand?
So it's really all about getting to know who our students are and how they learn and how they process music. And I'll give you the example of my student Keegan, who didn't like to read music. Did he have any obstacles for learning pieces? No. Because what was his resource? Well, his resource was a recording. And, just the other day, I got another, Instagram post or somebody listing all the people who are internationally renowned musicians who don't know how to read music. Okay. So whenever I see that, I settle down and I go, okay, I didn't have to spend 5 years getting Keegan to read music really as well as I can. What would have happened if I spent 5 years doing that? Well, Keegan would have quit after the first 5 weeks. Yeah. So I really have to look at students and to understand that no matter what limitations or how open their learning is, that resource that they draw upon is the resource that they're going to use to continue to be involved with music, not the ones that I wish they had,
or that you
so
force
that they
on them.
look like me. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it comes back again to that a question for teachers of, am I okay with shifting my role? When it comes to teachers, and I've had many teachers over the years ask me, what do I do when a child doesn't want to learn to read music? Because so many of us have built our entire sense of purpose on teaching children to read music. And if we take that away, what do we do? What's our purpose now? That's a really deep challenge for lots of teachers. And I think that's changing as teachers are being more open to pop music and a little bit of creativity and a bit of improvising and being a bit more flexible in that way. I think that is shifting, but there is that underlying feeling for that student. I can't remember the name of the student you were mentioning who was just playing by ear by the sounds of things. It's like, are we okay with that? Is that all right? Are we a bad teacher? Because all of this goes through our head, right?
For sure. Yep. So it's about teacher identity and understanding that our role as teachers is shifting. You keep using the word shifting, and you're right. The role of teacher is shifting. The role, and I love it in your book, Notebook Beginners. So in the notebook, you trace the history of, especially from the printing press and this whole notion of learning to read music, and how strongly that's influenced what teachers are doing. So we're looking at basically the transition that's occurring now in terms of, we've got this long history of reading music. What are we going to transition to now? Well, we're going to include that, but we're not going to make that the only thing that we spend time on. And so we know that the other resources is playing by ear. For me, it's so interesting with this student, who really loved to play things by ear. He's a great composer. And someone might say, well, how is he ever going to be able to write any pieces if he can't read music? And I just go, have you not seen the technology that's available these days? Because technology has come to his rescue. Technology is here. It says, play it on the piano and I'll rewrite the score for you. That's all we need to do. I get it. On the one hand, we feel like there's things we need to do. On the other hand, I want to make sure that that's always in conversation with what matches who they are.
And look, let's be honest, there's lots of musicians out there who don't need to write down their music anyway. They play it, right? I'm thinking when I was growing up, my dad used to listen to Jean-Michel Jarre all the time. He's an electronic music composer. Do you know the name, Merlin?
No, not familiar totally.
No, okay. I wonder how many of our listeners will have grown up with Jean-Michel Jarre. Incredible. He was a pioneer of electronic music, synthesizers in the late 70s, really. And, there is no way you could write down what he was doing anyway, but he was an incredible musician. Anyway, I don't know where that came from, but I just want to talk briefly about repertoire. You mentioned masterworks can be a good guide for teachers, perhaps, during this period. But so if we are taking a bit of a teacher-led approach, and we know that we need to move students forward and progress them during that intermediate period, do you have any recommendations about repertoire and the role repertoire plays in that period, and tips, I guess, for teachers?
Yeah, so I'll go to my student, Jesse, who did those 3 upper-level exams. I went to the repertoire list within the syllabus, and I chose all the pieces, always knowing that I had to pay attention quite quickly to see if this was a piece that was going to resonate with him once he got things going. So I do love syllabus out there. I'm a frequent, I wouldn't say anymore, 47 years of teaching, I've got my favorite things that I can draw from. So I will say, if you're a teacher who's wanting to expand that things like the RCM syllabus, I don't know what syllabus you would use for exams in Australia. Can you maybe just tell us what that would be?
Yeah, we've got a number of boards. The biggest one's the AMEB, the Australian Music Exam Board, but there's also, yes, we actually have Trinity and ABRSM and ANSCA and Cecilia, and we've got heaps. It's kind of crazy.
So I think the point I want to make is that there are resources out there that are already there. And it may feel intimidating for teachers to access that for the first time. I'll just say it gets easier. You start to find out which one of those pieces within those syllabus are the ones that resonate with you, first of all, and then you start connecting students to those as well. So, yeah, for sure, established syllabus that are out there, I'm using those for sure when I need to.
Can be useful guides. Yeah, particularly for teachers. And many Australian teachers and UK teachers would do the same thing. They would build their curriculum based upon loosely the exam, or sometimes very, very closely, the exam frameworks that are in existence. And you're saying, yeah, that's actually a good guide, keeping in that balance of, teacher-led, student-led. And what, I do like that very simple approach of your sort of, 4 pieces from me, 1 piece from them, or 2 and 2 and things like that. I think that's really fun. So, look, I would love to give you an opportunity to quickly talk about your book. So it's called More Than Music Lessons, A Studio Teacher's Guide to Parents Practicing Projects and Character. You almost got the quadruple alliteration there.
I worked for a long time. I couldn't find a 4th one.
I was interested that one of the 4 parts is about the incorporation of non-performance projects to amplify students' musical personas. And I really like this idea. And I think the quote from the book is, by engaging in activities beyond traditional performances, students can explore their creativity and deepen their connection to music, or something like that. Can you tell us about this? Because I think we do, as teachers, generally have a very rigid view that the only outcome of learning a musical instrument is to perform it live on a stage, probably.
Yeah, so this is a real mainstay of my studio. It's a cornerstone these days, and it's been that way for quite a significant amount of time. What does it involve? Well, I'll just give you the example of the starting point for all my students, and it is to tell their own musical story. And so the question is, what's the first piece you remember playing? What's the first piece you remember singing? What music has moved you through your journey as a music student? And it's a project that I start typically when kids are around the age of 12. They're familiar with making presentations at school. Here in Canada, that's not an unusual thing that they make presentations. And so they put this together into a PowerPoint, where it may have music video of them or their favorite pieces, and they present it in the final half of a concert. That's the opening activity. And from there we go on to, is there a topic you'd like to explore? Is there a piece you'd like to share your connection with? Is there a musical idea that you'd like to share, that you'd like to look at more? And we'll spend about maybe 5 to 7 minutes through the discussion of that during their lesson. And again, they'll present it at a concert. But I've had everything from, Janelle, what did she do? She's in grade 7. She's got a research project. The title of her presentation is, What Makes a Good Piece Good? She's interviewed 3 of her friends at school. She's got the questionnaire. She's finding out what they think makes a good song good. She's presenting this to the rest of my studio. Nathan, he's doing research on the benefits of music in the workplace. So, it's just so interesting, the topics that they've come up with. Anybody who's interested in, you can see them on my website, which is the teachmusic21c.com. I'll talk about that maybe a little bit later, but you can see examples right there. What's the standout point for me was when I asked my student Nathan, this is after maybe about 3 years of doing presentations. And I said, what's the real growth for you? What's the benefit of this? What have you learned? And he said, Dr. Thompson, it's so interesting. So he's now in about grade 9 or grade 10. He said, for most of my life, most of his life, he said, whenever someone asked me to explain something, I always use sports as my analogy. Because I swim, I'm a competitive swimmer, so I use sports. He says, I don't use sports anymore. I use music as my way of explaining concepts that exist elsewhere. And I went, oh my goodness, you mean, and this is what I'm saying to myself, you're transferring your learning in the music studio performance research situation. You're transferring your learning to somewhere else. How amazing is that? And that he could articulate it after these 3 years of doing presentations and, having a student-led, I'll say he's a good example of someone who did student-led all the time through junior high and high school. Yeah, we only did things he was interested in.
That's pretty self-aware for a 14-year-old, I've got to say. That's impressive. So just for clarification, all of your students work on, while they're working on the music, they're also working on a project alongside that. And they all do it at the same time, but they're working on their own projects with you. So maybe 5 minutes in a lesson. And then at the end of a period of learning, you'll have a concert of some sort, and they'll play music as well as present, or some may just choose to present.
No, everybody's playing and everybody's presenting. So, and it's not for all of my students, it's only for my students age 12 and up.
I see. Okay. And as you say, they start with that more general sort of, everyone does that first one as a more general, you just, as you described, and then they can start choosing topics. And how many of these would they do in a year? Would just be one or maybe two?
So really interesting, because we have an ongoing process of following up on what the presentation accomplished. And with the follow-up, I'm asking questions like, did you get to where you wanted? Were there things that you left out that are undone? Did you completely close off this topic? Are you happy with what you did? And so there are occasions when my student, like any one of the students that I've just mentioned, said, no, I didn't get there. I got part of the distance done. I'd like to have another 3 months, next presentation, to bring it to a higher level. Or somebody said, no, that was exhausting to do that topic. I had no idea it was going to be so hard. Why didn't you tell me? No. And I might have said, this topic might be a bit big for a person your age to take on. You could just narrow it down to talk about this. So there is that. There is the follow-up. Do we build on what was already there? Do we refine what was there? Do we take another topic that was there? So all of those things are possible. And I had so much fun working out the template for this whole process of guiding students through this process of non-performance projects. So it's not just something that they do and I say, oh, congratulations, and we move on. No, it's something they do, and then we look at it, just like I would do in a lesson or with the concert. What were you happy with about the concert? What were you unhappy with? What are we going to do now? Do we want to continue with that piece? Do we want to move on? So all of those things that we have that are part of the reflective process, that are part of learning to sing or play a musical instrument, those reflective processes are equally important in non-performance projects as well.
Well, this is just one part of 4 parts of your book, so I recommend teachers go and explore it. If you're interested, and this sounds interesting, it sparked an idea in your brain, then make sure you go and explore Merlin's book. We'll leave a link to that in our show notes. Merlin, before we wrap things up, I wonder if there is any sort of, just a couple of final thoughts, a couple of tips maybe for teachers. You have obviously an incredible wealth of experience behind you, not only in your own teaching, but also with the work that you do at 21C, helping other teachers. So have you got a couple of final kind of thoughts you could share with us about everything we've talked about today?
Well, I think I'll go back to a couple of the things that were I'll call them the pain points of where we got to today. And they have to do with teachers' sense of identity and the sense of, who am I as a teacher? Where do I get where's my foundation? What is my foundation? And for many teachers, I think we can recognize that because of the way we've been taught and having that connection with the teacher-led curriculum, because of that, it may be difficult to move into that uncertain area of student-led, which is like a huge step in it, but even to the shared curriculum place. So I'll just say, teachers, we need to be kind to ourselves. And the biggest thing for me that people can do to enhance their teaching is to hang out with teachers who are having these kinds of conversations. Because I understand full well that the music teaching environment, in particular music studio teaching, is a very isolating experience. We see students and we see parents nonstop all day long, and we're always the person who's reaching to them, but no one's reaching to us. So things like what you're doing with Top Music and I'm doing with Teach Music 21C, these are really important because we're putting together communities who are thinking about music teaching differently. And, if there's, I've mentioned a couple of phrases, inspiring our students to explore the music that inspires them, but there's also the idea that teaching students isn't about fitting them into a method. It's really about meeting them in music. And those are two very wonderful statements, but they really do rest with us. It's up to us to make that gesture. And I'll say maybe one last thing, to enter into some kind of reflective process for ourselves as well, to ask ourselves those questions. What kind of teacher am I? What kind of teacher do I want to be? Do those two things line up between my actions and what I'm doing? It's like me going back to that question. What will my adult students be doing, or what will my students be doing as adult music makers? And then I had to look at, is that actually happening in their lessons or not? And if it's not happening, what am I going to do to change that around? So a couple things, community, and then our whole reflective process are my two big things for everybody.
Wow. So many great comments coming out of that, Merlin. I keep coming back to purpose, teachers thinking and wondering, what is my purpose? And if you haven't thought of that recently, then this could be a good opportunity to do that. What is your purpose? Is your purpose to teach as many children as possible how to read music? Or is it something far greater than that? And I'll leave it there. So, Merlin, where can people go to find out more about you and all the great things that you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm the director of a community called Teach Music 21C, and you can find us on Instagram, on LinkedIn. The big place is the teachmusic21c.com website, where you'll find all kinds of resources. You'll find the resources to the student, what we call the non-performance projects. You'll find resources for those there. You'll find links to the podcasts that we're doing as well. And the book, I'll make sure that you'll find links to the book as well. I will give a quick shout out for the book. It's currently discounted between 10 and 20% through bloomsbury.com. And I'll make sure you've got the link for that as well, because my publisher has switched to a new agency, so it's now available through Bloomsbury. And when I look today, the ebook is now available for 20% off, which puts it somewhere below the $40. And I'm not sure what currency it was, but it seemed pretty reasonable.
Okay, that's great. We'll add links to all of those things to our show notes. Merlin, I'm so glad that we've been able to connect, and I look forward to actually connecting in person when we can meet at a conference or something like that. I think we'll have great chats ahead. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
It's a pleasure. And I hope we can have another conversation somewhere down the line. That would be great too. Thanks.
Me too. See ya. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's interview with Merlin, and I wonder if that idea of non-performance projects might have sparked an idea in your head about how that could work in your studio. And maybe you've also thought a little bit about whether you tend to run a teacher-led model of curriculum, or do you run more a student-led, or do you run a shared, or does it change over time? These are all really great things to think about, and I hope this podcast has got you thinking about how this actually works in practice. And hopefully you also enjoyed all the different stories that Merlin was able to bring to today's conversation. It was great hearing about so many of his students. Well, if you'd like to catch up on any of the links from today's show, make sure you head over to our show notes, topmusic.co/episode 423. Until then, I am Tim Topham. You've been listening to the Topcast, and I look forward to catching up with you again this time next week. Bye-bye, everyone. How do you keep up to date with all the latest trends and research into music education? How do you connect with other teachers around the world and make sure your teaching stays fresh and relevant for students of all ages and stages, both now and into the future? I created our Top Music Pro membership to be the one-stop shop for music teaching resources, training, support and community, and I'd love for you to come and join us inside. With over 40 comprehensive training courses, hundreds of teaching demonstrations and lesson plans, free monthly sheet music, discounts, and all the business and pedagogy support you could ever need, Top Music Pro is the community you've been looking for. If you're ready to level up your learning from the podcast and join thousands of other teachers in our global network, head over to topmusicpro.com today. If you enjoy this show and want to hear more of our work, be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening today. For links and resources mentioned in this episode, visit us at topmusic.co/podcast or check out the show notes. I'm Tim Topham. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy your week ahead, and I'll catch you next time.